Hello there! My name is Hare, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. Please note that while I am filming this video, I have my cat Jack curled up on my lap, and now I can't move. Now that we've got all that out of the way, today's video is going to be the final group of characters I created for my fantasy world. For those of you who don't know, I am creating a fantasy role-playing game, or RPG for short, based on my fantasy world, and I am currently creating characters for that fantasy world. Now, in order for me to create these characters, I am using the way that I created for any future players of my RPG to create their own characters. I roll a D8, an 8-sided die for those of you that don't know, and whatever number it lands on is the archetype for that fantasy character. Now, if you haven't seen all the other videos where I discussed this world and these characters, I'm going to put a link to a playlist of all the previous videos up in the cards and in the description down below, in case you want to catch up before watching this. Now, like with those last videos, I'm going to talk about each character's lore first, and then talk about the creative process behind each one. Now, minor spoiler warning before I get to these characters. All 4 of them are what are known in my world as Storyborns. Essentially, they're the offspring of the various fairy tale and storybook characters that we all know and love. So, without further ado, here are the final 4 fantasy RPG characters that I created. At least for now. Everyone knows the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but what if I told you there's more to the story after that first initial encounter happened? After that whole incident, Goldilocks eventually went back and apologized to the Three Bears, or more accurately, 3 werebears, for what she did. At the time, she didn't know the house was locked when she found it, and due to an ancestral connection to Hermes, the Grecian immortal of, among other things, thieves, doors tended to unlock and open of their own accord whenever she was around. The family of werebears forgave her, and, eventually, Baby Bear and Goldilocks became fast friends. As they grew older, this friendship soon blossomed into romance, and, eventually, marriage. A few years later, the former Baby Bear became the second Papa Bear, when Goldilocks gave birth to their son, who they named Aurelian, meaning golden. Now, like with most wares and part wares, Aurelian experienced his first change during the first full moon after his 13th birthday. Now, like with a lot of my previous characters, Aurelian was meant to be part of a fantasy novel that I was working on. I really need to get back to that at some point. Now, with a lot of the other characters, I kind of hand-waved some of the details of his origin in order to avoid some awkward questions. Now, I imagine that other than the werebeast powers he inherited from his dad, some of the things Aurelian inherited from his mother are the ability to unlock doors with his mind, and just personality-wise, the need to have things just right. Everyone knows the story of the Frog Prince and the story of Swan Lake, but what if I told you that those 2 stories were more interconnected with each other than you would originally think? When the young Damien Charming I was just a young prince, he was courted by a young woman who, when he eventually broke it off with her, turned out to be a witch. She used her dark magic to curse him into the form of a frog, and she told him that the curse could only be broken by true love's kiss. Now, when he met Odette, a princess from another kingdom, saving her golden ball from the bottom of a well essentially kick-started their whole relationship. However, on the night before their wedding, the witch who cursed the prince decided to curse his fiancée, this time into the form of a swan, as her own demented version of a test. She tells him that in order to break the spell, he must somehow prove that he truly loves this princess. After many, many challenges, he finally broke the curse on his fiancée, and they eventually married for real. After many happy years together, they had a son and named him Prince Damien Charming II. Unfortunately, some remnants of the curse placed upon his parents remained, but Fairy Godmother used her magic to soften these curse remnants and turn them into a blessing, allowing Prince Damien I, now King Damien I, Princess Odette, now Queen Odette, and Prince Damien II to essentially become a were frog, were swan, and multi-were. Now, similar to one of my favorite book series, I imagine that there were slash are multiple Prince Charmings, now King Charmings, as opposed to just the one, and that they're all brothers. However, there are quite a few more than in that series, and I imagine that instead of all their names beginning with the ch sound, as in charming, they would all have names beginning with one letter of the alphabet in descending order, i.e., the oldest having an A name, the second having a B name, the third one having a C name, and so on and so on. Now, I imagine that all of them met their future queens in one way or another that spurred on each respective story, but as previously mentioned, King Damien I and his wife had a complicated story that, I mean, either way you slice it, it definitely ended in a really interesting manner, wouldn't you agree? Now, everyone knows the story of Cinderella, but how many people can say they know the story of her godmother? Now, the fairy godmother was young once, and when she was being taught magic at school, she did meet a young man that started courting her. Helping Cinderella was her first ever assignment as her fairy godmother, and after that, of course, she helped others whenever she could. Now, eventually, the young man she met while she was being taught magic needed her help, as a curse was placed on his father, turning him into a doll. When she eventually reversed the curse, she and the young man developed a relationship with each other and later on married. A few years after their marriage, their daughter, Faye, was born. Now, when creating Faye, I thought it would be a cool idea to give Fairy Godmother a child, which I guess technically not only makes Faye a storyborn, but also a changeling, since her mother is a fairy and her father is a human. She can still fly and cast magic, which is a pretty good perk, but also, for the most part, she is weak to the typical Fae weaknesses, i.e., drinking milk and cream intoxicates her like humans and alcohol, and iron and steel harm her like silver does to werebeasts. Everyone knows the story of Beauty and the Beast, but what happened after the happily ever after? Well, to answer this question, they were married to each other for many, many, many years. But one day, King Adam Charming found his kingdom attacked by a band of raiders. When he and his queen, Queen Bella Charming, found this out, he turned to Fairy Godmother and asked her to grant him back his curse so that he could use his beast powers to defend his kingdom. She granted this wish, but altered it so that he could now take his beast form at will. Now, when the people of his kingdom found out about this new development, crime, understandably, took a plummet. And when people from the neighboring kingdoms found out about this development, they did not dare try to take over. King Adam ruled over the kingdom with a firm but just hand, paw. Queen Bella also definitely tempered the king and balanced him out. A few years after this development happened, Queen Bella gave birth to a young princess, and the king and queen named her Cecilia. Now, Cecilia is the daughter of Beauty and the Beast, who, I imagine, since her father is now able to take beast form at will, she definitely inherited this ability as well. Now, one thing I like to do for all of my characters is to try to align them on the D&D alignment chart. And I imagine that Cecilia is specifically neutral good, which essentially means she just wants to do good for the sake of doing good, whether that means breaking the rules or enforcing them, if that makes sense. And there we have it. That was the final 4 characters I created for my fantasy RPG based on my fantasy world. If you want to know more about these characters, like with the last couple, I'll have the links to their respective articles on my website in the description below. If you like this video and you want more, please give this video a like and subscribe down below so you don't miss any new videos. Also, if you have any other ideas for any future videos, please leave your thoughts in the comments section down below and it might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I will see you all next week with a brand new one. See you then!